Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first of a series of webinars hosted by BIM Academy. Today we're going to be talking about how we can build resilience through a digital culture. Just a short introduction. Myself, Graham Kelly, Director at BIM Academy. I think the reason why we wanted to start with this one was really to start talking about this sort of people first approach to the implementation of digital transformations. I think the more that BIM Academy has spoken to clients and contractors and other people in the construction industry about how you move from where we were to a digital sort of workspace, if you like, the more we realise that you've got to take the people along for that journey, and that's absolutely critical to that. And like I've put in a quote there, culture eats technology for breakfast, which I think is a fantastic quote by a guy called Jeremy Till. So when we started looking at that, we met Chris, who is the founder of Evolve8 Coaching, who's a sort of got an expertise in this high performance teams and cultural change and resilience, and looked at how we could team up. So BIM Academy with the technical expertise and Chris with that sort of people to expertise, and how we could sort of put together an offering that does both and really stimulates that sort of change within an organization. And that's why we wanted to share some of those thoughts today around what that looks like. So I'm going to hand over to Chris to really run you through what the sort of resilience part of this is and the digital culture, and then just fire through questions when you've got them, and we'll strive to answer them throughout the webinar. So Chris, I'm going to send you live now.
Hi everyone, great to be here folks. Hi, I'm Chris Barclay from Evolve8 Coaching. As you may hear from my accent, English is not my native language as I come from Scotland. So I will speak slowly and deliberately to try and be understood. But I'm really looking forward to talking to you today because it's about a subject which is very close to my heart. Fundamentally, Evolve8 Coaching is about two things. We help organisations focus on strengthening capability and culture. Now, the reason that we do that is we know from experience that when you do that, you have happy and productive employees and you drive business success. So that's really why we focus on those key areas. And today we're going to specifically talk about digital culture and its link to resilience. I would love to say up front to you before we dive in, we do things a little bit differently. So you're not going to see a standard PowerPoint presentation with lots of bullet points, and that's quite intentional because we understand how it's possible to connect with people's brains and how it's possible to switch them off. I'm going to endeavour not to switch them off and to try and together explore digital culture. And I would ask you just to be open-minded, and hopefully it'll give you an opportunity to see some things you've not seen before and think about it a little bit differently. That would be my request. We've all sat in trainings and webinars where we haven't quite got what we wanted from it. So the intent here, I have two intents that I always set off with. One is to be useful for you and interesting to you. So those are the things I'm going to try and achieve. It's rather strange not being in a room with you, as that's what I'm used to doing, where I can interact, see your eyes, understand your level of excitement or not, and help us discuss that. However, we're going to make the most of this challenge and opportunity we have right now to do it in this format. So really looking forward to it. And please grab onto stuff you like, be open-minded to stuff that might seem a bit different, and I hope you enjoy it. That's my intention. So we'll keep going. So a little bit about myself, because I think there needs to be some context. The left half of the slide is my bulk of my career before I set up Evolve8. So I'm a PhD chemist by training, and I've spent 20 years in corporate R&D, where I was very fortunate to live in some fabulous places, such as you can see here, and obviously a close link to the construction industry, starting way back with the Great Wall. I spent some time in Beijing, and I also latterly lived in Singapore, as you can see, Marina Bay Sands hotel there, which many of you will recognise. And who knows, you may even be sitting in that part of the world. Fabulous place. The brands above are many of the brands that I was fortunate to work on and manage. And many of these are billion-dollar brands, or certainly well on their way to be billion-dollar brands. And the great thing about that, working on those brands, living around the world, managing high-performance teams, taught me a lot about how do we really get the best from ourselves. And that's why I set up Evolve8 to do just that in the outside world, as it were, out of my corporate role. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and it's fabulous to partner with an organisation like BIM Academy, because I can learn stuff from those guys, and likewise they can learn stuff from me. So it's really a match made in heaven for us, and I hope that you enjoy it today. So we're going to start with a bit of history. We'll start from the left-hand side, and as you look at these images throughout this presentation, what I'd love you to do is think about what you're seeing, jot down what you're seeing, because if I was in a room with you, I'd be saying, what do you see in picture 1? What do you see in picture 2? What do you see in picture 3? I can't do that in this format. So I'd love you to be having a go at that. And the reason for that is we all learn better when we're doing, rather than just listening. My job is not to stand here and try to lecture to you. It's to show you some stimulus and start to explore this topic together. So on the far left, what you can see there, as you may already have worked out, is the printing press around the 1400s, 1440. And that changed the world. You know, we started to put language onto paper such that books could be printed and knowledge could be shared more effectively. And that had a dramatic impact on the world. Sadly, not always in the correct way, as it resulted in many religious wars, etc., but it had a positive impact on the world for sure. The middle image you can see is around the 1700s, so that's the Industrial Revolution, where we started to look at how we manufacture, and that dramatically changed the world. It's changed our standard of living and the way that we operate today. And of course, on the far right, the advent of digital, the computer around 2000. So all of these things were significant breakthroughs, which is fabulous, and they've changed the world, but they didn't come without challenge. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today and explore. Because we're talking about digital culture and resilience, which are linked. All of these breakthroughs were also linked to resilience, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. What you can see here is frustration, challenge, and the reality is it's not possible to move forward or to change without that. If you believe it is, then sadly, you know, you'll go through a lot of pain. It's just the nature of the beast. However, you can develop skills to be able to cope with these challenges. And that magical skill is depicted in this picture here. So if you imagine that you are in your air balloon and things are going well, it's a lovely sunny day like today, happens to be in the northeast, and all of a sudden the air goes out of your balloon. Now you can choose to go down and never be seen again, or you can choose to do something that allows you to survive and to thrive, such as this image shows you turn the little basket into a boat. And that's what resilience is about. Resilience is about facing challenge and change and managing it effectively. So we're going to explore that today. So a few numbers on this page. And as I say, you'll see some different things today, and it's just to open your mind up and let you think about things a bit differently. On the left-hand side, what you can see are some numbers, 2%, 20%, and 5 minutes. I'm going to explore what they are first. 2%. Now, normally I would ask you, if you were in a room with me, what do you think that means in relation to that picture? You can see a picture there. What do you think the 2% might be? Now, I'm sure some of you have already started to think about this, but it's actually the percentage of our body that is our brain. So 2% of our mass happens to be our brain. So about 1.5 kilos. Clearly, it does depend on the weight of your body. Some of us are larger and smaller, and it's all good, but roughly 2% is our brain, of our body's mass. Now, interestingly, it uses about 20% of our energy of our body. So that little 2% is using up 20% of our energy all the time. So that's significant. Yeah? And if we switch the brain off, we'd only last about 5 minutes. So this is an incredibly powerful thing, as you know. But maybe what we don't think about quite as much is the numbers that are on the bottom of the slide to the right. And that is that 2% accounts for 100% of our resilience. So that little 2% controls how resilient we are or how resilient we are not. And where we have lots of academic training and functional training in our jobs, we often don't have that same focus on how we think and how we use our mind to its fullest. And this is what we're going to explore a little bit today, resilience. So I would love you to have a look at these calculations, these numbers in front of you, and have a look and see what you see. And I'm going to pause just for 5 or 10 seconds to give you a chance to look at the numbers. So as you look at those numbers, I'm sure, because every room I've ever been in, someone has noticed a mistake, and rightly so. 9 and 7 does not equal 15, it of course equals 16. Now, why do I show you that deliberate mistake? The reason I show you is to talk to you about how we think. Human nature is such that we gravitate to the challenge or the mistake. It's the way we're wired. No one has ever said in a room that I've been in, 4 of the calculations are correct, so 80% are correct, and 1 of them is only out by 1 digit. Because people don't intuitively approach situations with that level of positivity and optimism, even though they call out the negative in a very different way. So I'd love you to think about, as we think about digital culture and resilience, digital culture is challenging. And if we focus on the negative stuff and the challenges, it's very hard to move forward. So instead, how can we focus on some of the positives while recognising there are challenges and negatives? And that's just a wee food for thought as we move on. So, as we think about digital, we're going to explore some companies and organisations. We're going to explore how you become more resilient and build digital cultures. And we're going to explore different things because it's a fascinating topic. You could literally talk for hours on this. So let's look at these 2 companies. I'm assuming many of you, I apologise to any younger folks watching, you may not be familiar with the company on the left, Blockbuster. Now, let's talk about these companies. Blockbuster were enormous. Early 2000s, they had 85,000 staff, 9,000 stores globally, and they were turning over, give or take, $6 billion. Enormous. Renting out videotapes for us to watch movies. You went into the store, for those younger ones watching, you got a movie, it was a fantastic experience, believe me, even though it might seem bizarre now, and you took it home, watched it and returned it. Blockbuster, however, don't exist anymore. Blockbuster went bankrupt in 2010. And the reason that happened to them is they didn't want to move to a true digital culture. Netflix, which I'm sure we are all familiar with, decided very early on, while they had a very similar business to Blockbuster, they were giving you a video that they sent to your home to watch, a movie, and then you returned it in the post. They decided to move to online streaming. And as a result of that, they now own that market. Their sales now are going up at 30% a year. They're currently, last year, they turned over $20 billion. Now, they have some challenges in making money because of certain other challenges. However, they embrace digital, and as a result, they are an enormous organisation, and Blockbuster no longer exists. So as we think about digital culture, please don't let yourself become the Blockbuster, become the Netflix. So digital culture, what is it really? Because when we get into definitions, I hate to pull definitions from Wikipedia and from dictionaries because it doesn't really say what something is, in my mind. Digital culture is fundamentally about driving positive changes. That's what it does. You happen to be using digital to do that, but it creates many other behaviours that allow you to drive positive change. So for example, it can increase sales, lower cost, increase productivity, etc. So it's a very, very powerful thing. Now, where people get a little bit unstuck on digital culture is that folks focus on it has to be this positive change that's enormous, big. It happens infrequently, but it's so big. So we spend a lot of time trying to find that big, enormous change, which happens so infrequently or occasionally. In reality, much of what digital culture is the small and frequent positive changes. They add enormous business value, and that's what organisations who have strong digital cultures do. They do small and frequent changes such that they can make a positive impact on their business. Now, digital cultures do many things, and I'm trying to give you a bit of a helicopter view of the ones that I've seen, and I know many of you, you're knowledge holders also, you will have lots of experience also, and I'd love to know more about that as we get to the Q&A. What they certainly do is they create environments where folks within the organisation are looking very intuitively at what's needed. You know, what do we need as a business? They're also looking at what's possible in a business. And really importantly, they're working out where do they overlap, because that's where you really drive business value. Often in organisations which don't have the right digital culture, people fall in love with what's possible, but actually it's not needed. If you create a system that solves procurement, but actually that's not, it's a work process that you need, not a digital system, you've done the wrong thing. So digital cultures that work really well look at the what's needed and the what's possible, and then they really drive business value by looking at where they overlap. So I'm going to keep going. I know I'm going through a lot, folks, but it's really helicopter view, a few key themes, and we'll explore them together. I'm always fascinated by digital culture. The few comments I've made on the screen here come from hundreds of studies. They have looked at organisations, large and small, who have effective digital cultures and who don't. And it's absolutely unambiguous that when you have a strong digital culture, you will drive up and enhance the consumer experience, the customer experience. You will drive operational efficiency, your business model will be sharper, and as a result, you will turn over higher revenue, you will be more productive. These facts are unambiguous. They're in hundreds of research studies. And I even looked in this sector specifically, because the data above's for all sectors. And when you look at BIM from last year, 2019, those that are using BIM, 60% already see cost efficiency gains, 55% see speed of delivery gains, and 48% see increased product profitability. Now, I'm not claiming everyone is using BIM as they can, but for those who are using it and feel it's valuable, this is what they're seeing. So they're seeing the return on their investment. So we know that digital culture delivers. So let's look beyond construction and other sectors, because it's really important. One of the watchouts we have is we focus on our own sector. And I spent 20 years in corporate R&D. The one thing we did was we became experts in our sector, but we were constantly looking out with our sector, because that's where you'll find things that you hadn't thought of, different approaches that you can bring in, embed in your business and have great success. So we're always on the lookout for different ways of doing things. And that's what I'm going to try and mention to you today. And many of these you will be familiar with, but just so that you really have them top of mind as you're thinking about digital culture and how to move forward. How we shop in the top picture, how we stay in accommodation in the middle picture, and how we travel around has dramatically changed. If you think digital, what do you think of when you think of those today? And I'm sure if I was in the room asking you, many of you would be saying these companies. You'd be mentioning Amazon, Airbnb and Uber, who have all embraced digital and totally transformed how they approach the business. Amazon currently, from their e-commerce business, their cloud services, you know, they are incredibly innovative and actually probably one of the most innovative organizations in the world. And they are absolutely embedded in digital and digital culture. Their turnover last year was $280 billion, and that's grown at 30% a year. They came from nothing all the way up to, it's phenomenal, because they've embraced digital. Clearly they've had a very inspirational leader and some great product-based ideas and offerings, but they've really changed the world by thinking digitally about everything. Equally so, Airbnb and Uber totally changed the way that we stay in accommodation. Airbnb are in 80,000+ cities around the world. They have 6,000 or 7,000 properties at least that they use. And Uber has changed the way we travel. Now, really important to note, Amazon incredibly profitable. Airbnb and Uber are not. So if you're sitting there rightly thinking, yeah, but they're not yet profitable, that's true. However, they've created a different way of approaching a business, and they're building up to profitability, and they will be, because they've come at it from a very different place, and they've been incredibly successful in doing that, and they now need to be profitable, which, let's face it, folks, is very important for a business. Now, there is a danger when we think digital culture. We think, let's think about tech companies and companies that are using tech. But that's not what digital culture is. That's one part of digital culture. They happen to be using it. The fact they use digital isn't that important. It's the way they think. And that's true of other organisations. I'm going to quote a few here and give you a little bit of information and taster. And again, I'm stressing, look out with your sector. It's incredibly insightful. L'Oreal, the biggest cosmetics company in the world. Nestle are the biggest consumer goods company in the world, much to my dismay, as I spent many years at P&G, who were the biggest consumer goods company in the world, but a few things have changed, but I'm sure they'll be back to the top one day. But these are amazing companies because they're established businesses. They're in traditionally not digital sectors at all. And we'll talk about what they've done because they've understood the value of digital. And in my time in P&G, I saw digital change the company dramatically. I've also mentioned Codelco. So this is the Chilean copper mining company who mine about 10% of the world's copper. And I put it in there just to show you that different organisations from different sectors are using digital in smart ways to change their business, and any business can use digital culture really effectively. So let's have a little look to give you a bit of a taste, because this is a bit of a taster today, a bit of a sense of what's going on. Nestle created a DAT team, a digital acceleration team, where they have a centre of excellence in Europe. They bring people in and train them, their employees, and then they send them back out to the global business so that they can spread that know-how and knowledge. That was their way of driving digital culture. L'Oreal, very interestingly, used reverse mentoring program where they had technical experts and digital experts partner with executives in the company so that they could understand digital better and so that they could start to understand how it could be used within their business. Very effective tool to drive digital culture. P&G set up a global business services that acted as a portal for all the external services that we could tap into as a company, from an IT point of view and digital point of view. So very different ways of doing it. And Codelco went from a very physical, they're mining copper out of the ground. They went from a very physical process to digital, fully automated, real-time data, dramatically changed how they operate. So what I'm trying to give you a sense of is there are lots of ways to do this. And so that you think there really aren't anywhere you can't use digital, because there isn't. There's no way you can't use digital and use digital culture to drive change. You might be wondering who these people are. I'm sure some of you know. So the picture on the left, the younger gentleman and the older gentleman. The older gentleman is Garry Kasparov, who was the world chess champion for many years. The gentleman on the left is the new kid on the block, world champion, Magnus Carlsen. So why am I showing you this in the context of digital culture? The big, rather high-tech looking device on the right, I'm sure many of you already know, is Deep Blue, one of the earliest IBM computers. Now, they said that a computer couldn't beat Garry Kasparov at chess. And back in 1997, Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess. Now, that was shocking in that world. Now, Garry Kasparov didn't walk away in a huff feeling sorry for himself. He thought, how can I use digital to get even better? How can I use machine learning to become an even better chess player? And that's what he did. He started to use machine learning to increase his skill. Magnus Carlsen has been using machine learning and computer learning to develop his chess since a young boy. And as a result, his current chess ranking, global chess ranking, is higher than Garry Kasparov's ever was. So it shows how we can continue to make improvements in any sector, in any walk of life using digital. Digital cultures are incredibly powerful and they make us more resilient and more able to do things. Now, I know I'm going from lots of different places, folks, but this is to try and give you a sense that don't think of digital as your computer. And I know you don't because you're very learned people, but it really is so big, and digital culture is about the way you think and the way you operate. So as we think about digital culture and people and resilience, digital culture can allow us to achieve great things like climbing this mountain. But the challenge always comes when we think about the information on the left. The challenge comes with people. And that's because when we don't have the right digital culture, we get at the very best compliance when we try to make a change. So we're able to do something on a digital program, but we're getting compliance no more from people. understandably, because we've not created the right environment. If we start to improve the culture, we start to get engagement from folks and we're making progress up the mountain, but the folks are starting to feel better, they're more involved, they understand the digital culture, they feel more resilient because of the way the organisation is thinking. And ultimately, to really have a digital culture, we want to reach this flow state, which is an instinctive use of digital culture and the techniques and the resilience methods that are built within it. And I'm going to say a bit more about that. So this will become a bit clearer. We're now going to talk a lot about people and how you build digital cultures and how they make you more resilient. So we're about 20 minutes in, folks. We should have about another 10 minutes because we're going to aim for half an hour, then a chance for some questions. I'll just take a little drink. Very strange speaking here and getting nothing back from you, but I hope you're following along. I can't resist, I'm a chemist, so I have to put in a chart from my PhD. I worked on catalysis, and working on catalysis, you learn a lot about activation energies. So the amount of energy it takes to do something. So the minute I started Evolve8, this was just top of mind for me, and I've seen it in every client. When you use digital, there's an activation energy, a challenge, a barrier to overcome, like the blue hump. There's that energy you're putting in to try and achieve something. The reality is digital cultures allow you to move to the green graph. It allows you to lower the activation energy and make things easier. So it makes you more resilient. It makes you able to handle situations because you know you're thinking in the right way, you've got the right tools to use. So apology for my chemistry chart. I have it in every presentation. Every client I've ever worked with knows I always have this chart, but it's really relevant when we think digital culture and lowering barriers. Now, one of the most important things is we need to have a super strong why when we think digital culture. And what do I mean by that? Now, if you imagine these folks on the bottom, they're all working together. So if we're trying to do a big digital change or in our organisation or create a strong culture, everyone needs to be part of that. And the only way that's possible in culture is if we have a super compelling why we're doing it, a very motivating why for the individuals. They get why we're doing it and want to do it. And the reason for doing it is very strong. So we really need to think about the why at the start of any programme in digital. We need to keep reminding folks as we go and be talking about it all the way to success. Because if we don't, it's very easy to falter. Because why is people's motivator? We need to make sure that why is really an investment in the future, so that it's about growth, it's about an improvement, even if it's a sensitive topic, even if it's about headcount or budgets, whatever it may be. Really important to focus on the future because that's what people buy into, that's what people care about, and it's motivating. So when you think about your why, and why I would love to help you on that because it's the pivotal bit of any change in any culture and often the bit that folks miss, is you have to be both speaking to the rational brain and the emotional brain. And if you get those two things right, your culture can change. You can do almost anything if you get those things right. And on the left, you have to communicate it really well. You have to be very clear what the why is, very consistent and very succinct about the why. And then folks can buy in. So I know I'm going quite quickly over those, but it's just to give you a sense of some of these topics. And then, of course, we can have a discussion and delve into it more. So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, I don't know where Chris is going with all this, but I'm struggling because we're not great at digital culture. We've got a way to go. How do we do it? What do we do? And you might be sitting thinking, well, why is he showing us a line now about bike racing? This guy has completely lost his mind. But I honestly haven't. This is about helping you to think about things differently. So if I said to you, I've come 140th out of 141 competitors in a bike race, would you think I had a future in cycling? Probably not, and rightly so, maybe. Now, if I tell you that that same person, Geraint Thomas, was 140th in 2008 in the Tour de France, and he went on to win the Tour de France 10 years later. And he became the best in the world in 10 years, and that's true of digital. You can become the best in the world on culture and resilience, you just have to be very intentional. And the Sky team that Geraint Thomas was part of were very intentional from a digital point of view also. They use data, they mine data, they improve every part of the process, as I'm sure many of you know, and they went on to win 7 Tour de France's, which people thought was impossible. So there's lots of possible outcomes if you really think in the right way, and don't worry about starting from a low baseline because there's ways to get there very quickly. So we're now going to go through a few hows, and we'll go quite quickly through this because it's just big picture, because this is about the people stuff. How do you build a digital culture that makes you more resilient? You have to look into the future, like the crystal ball. You have to inspire and help people to think, and you have to take a leap of faith. You have to know that many have used digital effectively and it will help you, and a strong digital culture you will win with, and it may take time, but you have to take that leap of faith if you're going to do it. You have to remember as you do that, as you look at your organisation, everyone is different. You know, if you look at your team meeting here, and we won't go into which animals which in your organisation, it might be a bit sensitive. However, everyone's different and they all see the world through different lenses. And that's really important to be aware of as you start to think about the resilience of your organisation and how you build a digital culture. This statement, people always say, well, what do you mean by this, Chris? Perception is reality. If you think of digital, you will have a digital evangelist and a digital technophobe. And neither of those folks is wrong, because their perception is their reality. So you need to be aware of that, and then you need to work out how do you manage the way forward, where you enroll those people and get the best out of them, but understanding their perception is their reality. So one of them will really struggle because this doesn't feel right, and the other will literally want to digitize everything and maybe fail and cost you a lot of money. So it's trying to get that balance, because they're both right, but you have to manage your business to success. So really, how do you do that? You have to work out what's helpful and what's not helpful. That's really the key. And that might sound easier than it is. But as you think about that, let's go through a few concepts. You have to have people in their happy place because they want to do the thing. You have to inspire and motivate them, like the little girl here, so they're engaged. You have to have strong leadership. Now, hopefully you're thinking Darth Vader is not the right guy for the job when it comes to leadership, but certainly more supportive leadership. And the one that I love is the SWAT team leader in Kansas City, a gentleman called Chip Huff, true story, who changed the way his team were organised and what they did. They used to be very aggressive with the people they were dealing with, you might say with just cause, who they were dealing with, and very disrespectful of their properties, etc. And they had many complaints against them. He decided they had to change their way of operating and show great respect to the communities they worked in, and he totally changed how they operated. They now get rid of the bad guy or girl, which might seem bizarre, and then they spend some time making a cup of tea, warming a baby's bottle, speaking to the people in the community. Now you might be sitting there thinking, that seems crazy, but strong leadership is what drives strong changes and what makes the difference. And this guy made a difference, a real difference. And if a SWAT team leader can do it, any of us can do it, no matter what sector we live in, we work in. Whether it be construction, which is sometimes there's a certain persona about certain types of leadership, anyone can change and evolve for the better. We have to understand some core questions. So if I ask you these questions, and I want you just to think down in your head, yes or no. Who likes to know that what they're doing matters? Yes or no. Who enjoys having or using your knowledge and expertise? Yes or no. Who enjoys having some independence? Yes or no. Who values the opinion of respected experts? Now, if you're just thinking right now, are you a yes or a no for each of those questions? I'm going to bet that nearly 100% of you are yes for all of those questions. And I've used these questions many, many times. And the reason I believe that is because these are fundamental questions to human motivation. The number one is about purpose. Do you need purpose and want purpose in your life? And we all do. Number two is about using your mastery that you've acquired, being allowed to use that. Number three is about autonomy, you being given the autonomy and responsibility to do things. And number four is about using the expertise and authority that exists. They are things that we want to use, and you cannot change culture if you don't understand those and use them within your organisation. And you can build an incredibly strong, resilient digital culture when you use these concepts embedded within everything that you do. It's very, very powerful, and I'm sure many of your organisations already have them, and being even more intentional is incredibly valuable. So tightrope walking. So Chris has not lost his mind, folks. We're still moving down this resilient, and what do we mean by, that's just letting me know we're nearly at time. That's okay, we'll take a few more minutes, probably 5 minutes, and then we'll have a chance for some questions. This is representing being comfortable, being uncomfortable. This person is out there, very comfortable, but they're in a very uncomfortable position that any of us would think. So this concept of how do you become more comfortable when you're in an uncomfortable position, this is what resilience is about. The way that you do that is you focus on growth mindset. You focus on enjoying challenges, looking at challenges as opportunities, enjoying the digging into a complex problem. Growth mindsets have successful digital cultures embedded within them, and that's incredibly powerful. So please focus on developing a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. And there's some amazing books. I mean, Carol Dweck is the author of much of this space. It's incredible and very powerful for your organisation. Be ready to get feedback. Give feedback, receive feedback. Digital cultures and resilient people love it. We had a saying when I started my career that feedback's a gift, and it really is, because it gives you a chance to get better. And that's what digital cultures do. And resilient people love feedback. Even if someone's telling you you're not doing something right, that's a fabulous thing to have. Positive reframing, where if you're thinking of digital culture as scary and awful and I'm not sure where to go and it's complex, it is, yes. But if you reframe that and think of the optimism, the positivity, the best case thinking, while being aware of the watch outs, positive reframing can open up very different conversations and very, very different digital strategies. So how do you get better at resilience and digital culture? The answer is you practice. You have to practice and practice and practice. And the only way you can practice is by getting out of your comfort zone, like the tightrope walker, and by getting constant feedback from the digital evangelist, the technophobe, the manager, the external consultant, and constantly practicing building that resilience. And Peak, the book that I've mentioned here, is probably the definitive book on building expertise. That's where the famous 10,000 hours to become world class originates. And I'd encourage you to have a look at the book, but also to think about how do you build expertise, because it's critical. And you can become more resilient, you can build a digital culture if you're very intentional about deliberately practicing that. So, questions. Have a quick look at the questions and we're nearly done. And then we can have a chance to discuss. These may seem bizarre, but just stick with it. In all low-income countries across the world today, how many girls finish primary school? A, B or C? In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has A, B or C. And how did the number of deaths per year from natural disasters change over the last 100 years? A, B or C. So if you've got an answer A, B or C written down or in your mind, I'm just going to quickly show you the answers. Anytime I've ever used this slide, there is always surprise. And they're surprised because the data is so good. And the reality is the world is getting better all the time. Things we couldn't do digitally in the past, we're now able to do. And we'll be able to do more in the future. So don't please be scared too much by the digital and what's possible now and the challenges and the complexity. And I know many of you are leaders in this field, are driving it, but those who are not, try to think about things are getting better and they're only going to get better. So have a leap of faith to explore digital more. Information has went through the roof. So 2,000 years ago, we had 500,000 scrolls in the Great Library of Alexandria. That contained virtually all the written word in the world. Now, each one of us, 7 billion, have 320 times the Great Library of Alexandria scrolls because of all the information in the world. So what I would say to you is, there's information all around us, be a student. I didn't know this sector before, I knew the people stuff, but I've looked at a variety of books that Graham and others have recommended, and being a student is the thing I would say is more important than then. Be a student about resilience, be a student about digital culture, be a student about the things you don't have expertise in, and you'll really start to be able to create a digital culture. You become more resilient as an individual and as an organisation. Digital culture has so many benefits. It motivates people, it creates innovation, it delivers results, it allows you to just do so many things. It allows you to be resilient, and it allows you to overcome challenge and maximise opportunity. It's a fabulous thing, and you need to be very intentional about how you do it, but I wish you every success. And just to finish, because we don't want to go over too much, you have amazing teams, every one of you, because I know some of your organisations and they're stunning. You have an incredible set of people. So good luck as you think about starting on the digital culture path, as you think about strengthening your digital culture. We'd love to help if we can, so please let us know. We're not claiming we have all the answers. We learn from our clients just as they learn from us. But I hope you found it interesting today. It will be different because we're trying to help us think differently about digital culture. And in this unusual time, we wanted to create something that's a wee segue and a bit different and hopefully useful and interesting. That was my two intentions, useful and interesting, and hopefully we'll manage to do that. Very strange talking to a camera and not seeing you in person, but I hope this has been useful. Just like to say thank you very much. I'm Chris Barclay from Evolve8, and life is very good. Thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant, thanks Chris. I'm just going to change this over to just our videos as we're here, just to ask a few questions. Thanks Chris, that was really interesting. Guys who are on the call, if you've got any questions, just fire them into the live Q&A event in there. I'll start, and then if any turn up, then we'll ask them as well. But yeah, just a couple from me really. But I guess for me, digital culture is all about trying to work out how to sort of make an organization more able to change, or more malleable, if you like, and if you're going through a digital transformation, how do you make that organization malleable? So really the question was, when you're trying to change an organization, what's that top tip for building resilience so that people are comfortable with being able to change and moving that forward?
It's a great question, Graham, and one we work with clients a lot on. I think that there's probably three key things that we do and work on, because I think the three are very important. Number one is co-creation. Let's be honest, none of us want to be told what to do and have no input on it. It's not the nature of the way we're created. So co-creation is an incredibly powerful tool. So try to co-create, even when it's a sensitive topic, right? Try and co-create. The other two are, you have to acknowledge the challenges. While I'm showing you about positivity and optimism, you have to initially acknowledge challenges and difficulties before any organisation can move forward and change. Really important. And the third is, provide motivating enablers. Provide ways that folks can engage, really strong whys, techniques like positive reframing. So those three things: co-creation, then acknowledging challenges, and motivating enablers. They're really the key tools that we've used successfully to help organisations manage change and be more resilient.
Brilliant, thanks Chris. We've got a question coming in. It's from anonymous, so we can't give you credit for it, but it says, do you agree with that the biggest challenge with digital is proving the negative?
Proving the negative. It's interesting. If I understand your question, sorry I can't interact to understand your question better. I think there's a culture at the moment, or a sense, that digital is for some big tech companies, and maybe say it's not for us, or we'll do our smaller version of that. So I think there's a sense of, yeah, let's it's a bit scary and big and complex, so let's just say here's the negatives and we won't do it. If that's what you're meaning by the question, I believe that.
Yeah, I think Steve's just put a bit extra in there, but it's about proving that the benefit will save money, or that there is a return on investment, or you currently don't. He says we currently don't get recognised as long-term costs, as long-term costs are seldom acknowledged. So it's about that proving the return on investment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I get it. Yeah, great question, Stephen. I totally get it. I get where you're going. In all of these things, return on investment is always at the core. No one wants to do anything or should do anything before we're clear on the return on investment. The challenge, of course, is that in the digital world we deal with, we're dealing with big complex situations, lots of options. The ROI isn't always completely unambiguous. So that's when we need this strong leadership. We need folks to make judgments, and clearly we need to do the right investments that manage our business and don't do anything foolish, but we also need to get comfortable on that risk factor, because it's not an exact science. It really isn't. There's lots of options you could go for, and therefore that strong leadership, getting comfortable with the uncertainty, and then having a good solid judgment on, we feel we're going to get an ROI, and also managing that investment relative to the size of your business and spend, so that you don't do anything foolish should it not go the way you hope. But you have to take a leap of faith, and hopefully seeing these organisations today who are doing that in every sector, every walk of life, will maybe give folks a bit more impetus. When I work with companies and we share that, people feel a bit more, right, we've got to go and do this. We're going to be Blockbuster. We want to be Netflix, right? So we're going to do it, even though it feels uncomfortable. So I hope that answers a little bit your question.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. And I think I had a second question that sort of maybe builds on that as well. Does resilience have to start top down in an organisation? So do you need the leaders to say, look, we're gonna be a resilient organisation. We're going to start looking at different parts of this, or is there room for a bit of positive disruption from the bottom up, if you like? And again, maybe playing with Steve's question there, is there ways of some disruption from the bottom up, almost proving some of that small return on investment to evidence what's happening at the top?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question again, Graham. I think for me, resilience is for every person. You know, I want my 9-year-old to be building his resilience, just as I want one of my colleagues to be building their resilience, because it improves your life and your work. So resilience is for everyone. That said, of course, organisations who their management team embrace it, put in programs in place like the resilience training we do, those organisations get more return from it, because when your management invest in it and make it clear on its importance and value to the business, then absolutely folks start to wake up to it a bit more that maybe wouldn't have adopted those resilience techniques before. So I think it's both. Do it as individuals, go for it, because it changes your life. I know it's helped me in my working life and my home life, but equally so, management teams who do it, you know, reap the benefits for many years to come.
Brilliant, thank you. And Steve's just dropped in that Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for $80,000.
It's spot on.
That would have been
exactly right.
Would have been one hell of a leap of faith that they may have. Just one more question from me, and then if anyone else has got any on from the floor, just to feed them in. But in your experience, what happens when you try to implement change without putting people first? So we to be fair, we've done this as an organisation as well. We've tried to implement protocols or processes and give them to an organisation. Here you go. This is how you run out a BIM process or program, and it hasn't necessarily worked. But just from your side as well, what's that? What happens when you don't put those people first and you don't put that culture first?
I think sadly, when you don't, you're destined to fail or spend a lot of money when you don't involve the people and engage with the organisation. But I understand why people do it, and I've seen clients do it, because there are some sensitive topics out there. You're dealing with headcount and people's livelihood, you're dealing with budgets. So there can be a sense of, let's do this top down and the organisation will hear. But that's quite dangerous, because ultimately you need that organisation that remain, even in a sensitive topic, to be fully engaged and on board. So again, that co-creation piece is massive. Even when you're dealing with a difficult topic, people can understand. They don't need to like what you're doing, but if they respect and understand why you're doing it, they're on board, right? Even if it involves some pain for members of the organisation, budgets in the organisation, when you're really clear on the why and people buy into that, you can do almost anything and people are with you. So top down without involving the people really is a recipe for disaster. I understand why people do it because of sensitive topics, but there's ways to manage sensitive topics and still involve the organisation at the appropriate times.
That's brilliant, Chris. Thank you very much for that. Is there anything else you would like to add before we close?
No, I just maybe a comment. Firstly, to thank you, Graham, and BIM Academy for giving me the opportunity. You know, we've been fortunate to work with you guys, and as you well know, I know very little about digital, true digital. You know, I'm not, as you said at the start, I'm not an expert in that. I know a lot more about people and culture and performance. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you guys. I did want to ask you, Graham, how you see this digital, you're trying to change the digital environment you work in. And I guess part of the answer comes from the fact you're partnering with folks like me. But have you seen barriers to change that are people driven rather than anything else? And have you seen amazing successes which are people driven rather than anything else? Just curious what you've seen in your past.
Yeah, absolutely. Throwing a question for the facilitator as we end.
I'm going to make you work for your money as well.
Yeah, all good. No, I thank you very much for your time as well, Chris. It's been really good. I think from a BIM Academy's perspective, absolutely, we've seen that. As I said, we have in the past sort of done small projects for people where we've simply done some template documents for them and sort of handed them over. But it's very difficult for them to then for people within organisations to then really grasp them and understand the context of what's in there and why they're doing it, and that why isn't necessarily there, which you talked about. So I think we've absolutely come to the realization that you have to bring the people along for this, and we've worked with some fantastic organisations and are continuing to work with organisations like Sydney Opera House, which is a completely people-driven disruption to BIM and FM. And so I've talked a lot about it in the past, and there's articles on our website and around what they've done. But without the guys like Chris and Brian and Steve and Michael and those guys that sit in the room in the basement and build the model of the Opera House and manage all the information and are passionate about it and understand why they're doing it, which is to ultimately save time on information and maintenance, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work if we just came in and said, well, implement this software and move forward. So yeah, I think for us it's very much about trying to bring the people along, and I certainly know that some of the big strategic work we're doing at the moment, we're absolutely sort of doing that and bringing the people along. We've got to put those people first, because it's the culture that's going to make this work.
Excellent, really helpful. Thanks. Cheers, man. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for joining. We will be posting this on the website and on the YouTube channel for anyone who missed it. So look out for those links as well. But thank you very much for your time.